Hi everyone, welcome to the Neural AI podcast, where we'll be delving into AI and its various subdomains. We'll be exploring an array of topics like generative AI, recommender systems, deep learning and reinforcement learning. We'll explore how this intersects with various industries like retail and healthcare, and we'll do this by chatting to thought leaders in the industry who share their personal journeys of perseverance, use cases and technical challenges. Besides this, we'll also have some fun along the way, discussing future predictions. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Yeah, let's just get straight into this. I know you've obviously gone from working on RecSys problems now to language models, and I think maybe not a lot of people see the similarities and why having a good background in RecSys is beneficial. So, how are language models impacting more RecSys?
So I think I've gone from like working with search to recommendations to language models. So my PhD topic was like search task understanding. So I was doing a lot of internship in Microsoft Research, Bing, working on search ranking problems, and at Spotify doing a lot of recommendations, at ShareChat doing recommendations, and now at Sourcegraph doing a lot of like large language models for Copilots, like coding assistants. So there's a lot of commonalities which I've seen across the three domains, right? I mean, search, RecSys, and LLMs. Because in search, like you're doing ranking, like there's an information need, the user will type in a query, and then you want to surface the relevant results to the users. In recommendation, the user need is maybe not that explicit, because you open the Spotify homepage or the Netflix or Pinterest homepage, you're like, hey, I want something which I can consume. There you're not probably typing in your query, but then we still want to understand your user intent and then give you the right set of recommendations. In the LLMs right now, it's more like that, hey, I have a question and probably like a need, and then like I want the LLMs to understand that and like get those results out. Now, one of the common problems which we've seen across all three domains is the possible space of useful information is insane. Because when you look at search, right, you have like 100 million or maybe like a billion documents on Google, which Google indexes, right? If you look at recommendations, and Spotify has close to 120, 130 million music tracks. And then you want to recommend the top 10, top 15 for you right now. Same, if you look at like Sourcegraph, you have like large repositories, like thousands of files and like big repositories of like GBs worth of like code. And we want to get the right relevant context. So if you see the commonalities across all three domains, it's more like that, hey, there's a large amount of knowledge base which is available, but then only a small subset is useful for this specific query right now. So I think there's a lot of commonalities wherein like we went from like millions of items to a few tens or hundreds which are relevant to you at this point of time. So that's what we've called like candidate generators in the search and recommendations domain. And that candidate generator becomes the context engines in these LLMs. Because if you've seen on Twitter or a lot of work happening in the industry right now, how do we reduce LLMs from hallucinating? So hallucination is a way in which like the LLMs cook up something that, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, so I'll probably I've trained these models on large data, so I'll kind of cook up some information and like give you an answer, right? So to reduce those hallucinations, we can go back and retrieve the relevant knowledge. And that's the common aspect, right? That search, retrieve relevant documents for this query. Music recommendations, retrieve relevant music items for this session, right? LLM say for this query, for the LLM, release some relevant context items over here. So I think like going from millions and hundreds of millions of items to a few hundred which are needed right now, I think those are at least the common aspects which immediately make the user much more happy, because if you retrieve the right context, then I get the right answer and you're not hallucinating. So that's one bit of commonalities across domain. The other bit, of course, is like everything which happens around these models, which is like understanding users, developing user profiles, doing personalization, doing experimentation. So I think there's a lot of commonalities of the experimentation pipelines. How do you do A/B testing? How do you develop metrics? How do you personalize the sessions? How do you develop user personas? All of these, right? So these are also common, which don't change much across LLMs and RecSys and search, but you still have to do that. Right? So I think there's a lot of commonalities, which at least I've seen between like people who have done search and they have to do that in LLMs. People who have done recommendations and they have to do that in like LLMs again. So I think there's a lot of like common points across these.
And generative AI, it's in a bit of a bubble at the moment. Finding talent, super difficult, particularly with language models and the right experience working on 0 to 1 problems and engineering at scale. Do you think companies who are struggling potentially could benefit from looking in the more RecSys focused talent pools and
Yeah.
bringing people over, and of course
Yeah.
they have the talent. The RecSys candidates have the benefit of working on new and interesting problems.
Right. No, exactly, spot on. I think I've done a bit of hiring over the last few years, and hiring good ML talent is a huge nightmare, right?
Yeah.
You again, right? ML it's gonna cost you a lot. It's gonna be a lot of investment, and these projects are not like deterministic. That you try this, it's gonna work. You try it might not work. It might work. So you also need like talent which is okay with stochasticity in the projects, right? That hey, I'm gonna try 3 projects, and some of them are gonna work, and I'm gonna iterate their way to working. What that means is hiring for these roles is like hard. And I'm preaching to the choir here. Like you've helped a lot of companies, including like ShareChat in the past when we work together, hire a lot of great talent. And it's hard, right? So not a lot of people would have done LLMs, and even if they have, then maybe not at that scale, or maybe haven't really done like user-centric problems, solve user-centric problems with LLMs or RecSys, right? So that's where like either, if I were hiring a team, then I would get at least some people who at least understand LLMs and do the context retrieval, can do this, and can do some experimentation. But then I would also go back to the people who have built these candidate generators at recommendation companies. Because literally, in my RAG is like retrieval augmented generation. Yeah. So LLMs do well if the RAG system is well. Because RAG essentially says that, hey, for this query, I can retrieve this context and give as a prompt to the LLM. Now, as we were talking about earlier, right, this is very similar to candidate generation in RecSys. Yeah. So why not go and like look for people who have built these candidate generators at Twitter, at Spotify, at ShareChat, at Meta, and then these are, at other companies as well, like fashion, or all the other companies essentially, right? Yeah. And those who have built these pipelines, they know what it takes to go from like millions of items to a few hundred which are relevant, and that is the knowledge and expertise which translates directly to what a new like Gen AI team would need. So I think like I would definitely go and like hunt for people who have that ranking experience, who have experience building candidate generators, who have experience thinking about metrics. Because again, hopefully we get to metrics in a bit more detail as well. But how do you evaluate whether this context engine is doing its job well or not? How do you evaluate the LLM, right? So there are different parts of evaluation. In recommendations, we have the candidate generator and the ranker. Right? The user only sees the ranker output. The user never sees the output from the candidate generator, because that's internal. But then if you're developing a candidate generator, you still have to evaluate that, hey, is it doing a good job? Is it getting the right candidates for the ranker to rank or not? So that evaluation is needed and it's important, but probably it doesn't get enough attention in the industry from the outside. But then whoever has worked on recommendation systems, they know it's very important to optimize these candidate generators for recall, optimize the rank for precision, and then make these work together to get the final output. That experience comes in handy in LLM, because I need people who can understand what it takes to build a good context source, and then retrieve the relevant context, evaluate that, make it better, and then make it work with the LLM so that the LLM can do the right thing for the user, and then the user is happy. So there's a lot of commonalities, as we've talked about, and people who have experienced the search stack and the ranking stack, recommendation stack, they are like very easy to translate into these problems, and they bring that amazing experience to the Gen AI teams as well.
Yeah. And at what stage, companies may be on different stages of their hiring journey, when would it be right to bring in a RecSys expert into a language model problem, large language model problem?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? I think like I don't know if there's a blanket answer over here or not, but as you mentioned, right, there are some companies who are like starting with their Gen AI product, right, and some companies who have let's categorize into 3 parts. An ML team which does not exist, right? Maybe 1 or 2 ML engineers, or maybe none. Then we have teams which could be like, hey, I have 5 to 10 ML engineers I want to scale, and then we have like big orgs. Hey, we have amazing talent, but then I need to hire the staff engineers or like some other additional talent. Now, each of these 3 will have probably different needs. And to bring in an expert on recommendation systems, for example. Now, somebody who's built recommendation systems overall, they can be a good first engineer as well. Yeah. Why? Because they've seen that, hey, you know what? You need context. I've done candidate generation, so I can loop in some models from there, directly build something, directly reuse what I've built, and then get it out, right? And then I can have, instead of going to the ranker, I can go to the LLM and get it out. So the first engineer would probably go breadth first, right? They're going to think about the context, they're going to think about prompting the LLM, they're going to think about evaluating the LLM, close the loop, and then have the system ready. Here, I probably don't need specialist experts on any of these to go in detail, right? Because I'm a small ML team, just hiring my first ML engineer, and I would rather go breadth first, do all these 3 problems to some accuracy, and then stitch it together and then make the system ready. But once you've done that, then how do you improve the context engine? How do you improve the evaluation? How do you improve the LLMs? There, I would rather go for like an expert within the recommendation community as well, right? I mean, you work with a lot of people who have been good on RecSys overall, but then like really specialists on like experimentation, evaluations, candidate generation, ranking models, ML infra. So I think once you've done that part of the work, then probably it makes sense to go in for a specialist talent. Like, hey, I mean, I have an LLM, I want to reduce the latencies from like 800 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds. There you need that ML infra specialist, right? Who can do quantization, who can bring in the nuances of the recent ML infra to kind of make my latency reduction go well, essentially. Right? Same for experimentation, same for evaluation and a bunch. So I think, right, I mean, the short answer after this long answer would be, let's get the initial RecSys people as the first few engineers who can build the entire stack. And then once you've done it, then let's see like where the value is for my business.
Yeah.
Because maybe latency is not a problem for me, for example, right? I mean, in one product, it's not that users expect the answer immediately. If that's the case, then I don't want to invest on ML infra just yet. Right?
Yeah.
I just want to invest on like a better LLM fine-tuning or a better context model. Versus on Cody, I mean, the product which we are working on, autocomplete. So people can go to their VS Code IDE, write a function, and then we'll complete that function for you. There you have strict latency requirement. Like, I mean, users are expecting the code to be completed immediately. They're not going to wait for like 800 milliseconds. So there the ML infra need is like a lot more stronger than at other places.
Yeah.
So I think this is where like specialists are going to be needed rather than like generalists who can build the entire stack.
Yeah, okay, understood. And you touched on kind of RecSys there. I had an interesting conversation with a head of AI this week.
Nice.
Just, how do you evaluate RecSys for user satisfaction and business goals, multi-stakeholder objective? What, I know it's an area of specialty for you.
Right.
How would you go about that?
Yeah, so I think I love this. I mean, as you mentioned, right? I mean, like multi-objective recommendations is, I mean, I worked on it for like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And I've started to view all of these companies as multi-stakeholder platforms, right? And we've worked together on hiring talent for a short video app. I worked at Spotify. We are in the UK, we use Deliveroo or Uber Eats often, right? So these are all companies which not only have to care about the user, they have to care about the delivery partners as well. They have to care about the restaurants. So it's not just that, hey, let's make the user happy. No, I mean, let's make the creators happy. Let's make the delivery partners happy. Let's make sure that the restaurants who are providing food, they're also benefiting. Because again, all of these design choices have an impact on these stakeholders on a daily basis. If I'm a restaurant and you're a Deliveroo, you never show my restaurant at the top, then I don't make money, right?
Yeah.
So most of these problems have an economic impact on a daily basis on these restaurants. Same, if I'm a delivery partner on Deliveroo or Uber Eats, and if you're routing your driver request to others and not me, then I don't get enough like value for my time each day. So these are all motivations for us to design these multi-objective systems. And I'm hoping that the first solution which somebody designs is not like a multi-objective. Like, let's just first get the first recommendation model working for the user. And once you build that for the user, let's add in the other objectives. Let's add in the business revenue angle, the creator angle, the restaurants, the delivery partners. And now you have a multi-stakeholder platform. That, hey, I have to keep the user happy while keeping the restaurants happy, while keeping the delivery partners happy, and also make money for the business. Because you're not doing it for like in a non-profit world, right? You want to sustain your business growth as well. So bringing in the money you're making as part of your business, I mean, that's also important. So this is where like multi-objective machine learning comes into play.
Yeah.
That instead of like just focusing on a single objective, optimize that and like maximize that, why cannot I design a multi-objective solution which can keep all the stakeholders happy and like literally uplift all boat at once? That, hey, I mean, the user is 5% happier, but the other stakeholders are also 1%, 2% happier. You can play with the trade-offs. Like, do I want to make the user 10% happy? And maybe the restaurants are like only 2% happy, right? You can play around with like 10% and 2%, 5%, 5%.
Yeah.
That becomes like a product decision at the end of the day, right? Fair. Where do you want your company to go? Where do you want your platform to go? But at least optimizing for these objectives at least gives you a way of making, I mean, literally like democratizing the benefit to other stakeholders as well.
How there's so many moving parts there, so many people to keep happy.
Right.
How do you evaluate a successful model? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, evaluation is a nightmare, right? I mean, if at all there's a phrase I will go back to is like evaluation is a nightmare. I mean, just these three words in the phrase, always. I mean, that probably should be the motto of my t-shirt. Evaluation is a nightmare, especially in a multi-objective world, right? Because imagine, right? I mean, you're Spotify or Netflix, and Netflix probably invest a lot in like Netflix originals, right? That, I mean, Amazon Prime invests in like Amazon Prime originals, right? That there are these videos which we have created. I mean, Netflix original is something which like is a Netflix production, right? And not like a Disney and Marvel movie. So at the end of the day, it's about like what business trade-offs do we want to make at this point of time? I mean, if I want to, again, right, if user churn is a big problem and users are churning and customer acquisition cost is high, right? I mean, you spend like $10 getting a customer, and if the customer churns, then I'm losing money over there as well. So if the churn is not a problem and if users are retaining, then if user satisfaction is high enough, then maybe I can spend a lot of more attention to keep the suppliers happy, to keep my other business revenue sources happy as well. Versus if users are churning, then it's a supply demand world, right? I mean, if users are churning, then there won't be users to consume your restaurants and delivery partners to keep them happy anyway. So there I would kind of shift gears and go back to like keeping the user happy. So I think like, at least what I've seen, there's a lot of incentive on making sure that the user satisfaction is never degraded.
Yeah.
And when possible, get a win over there. If there's an excess win, maybe then redistribute that across other stakeholders. But one important thing to highlight, it's a flywheel, right? I mean, if the creators are happy, if the users are happy, I can make the creators happy, but suddenly if you have better creators on the platform, they will create better content. And that better content will kind of engage more and more creators as well, more and more users as well. So I think like this is especially hard in the marketplace, right? Supply demand world. Reddit, right? Reddit just filed for their IPO recently, right? Yeah. I mean, I love Reddit as a user. I mean, I wish them all the luck and like they make more money. I mean, probably, once you're IPO, then I would want to invest in the stocks as well and hopefully it grows. But Reddit communities are like supply demand as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you are part of like London ML community Neural Rec community on Reddit, then you would go to that community on Reddit if people are posting good content, right? So if you get the right people to come in, be part of that Reddit community, post good content, then you'll have like more users visiting that community as well. So Reddit is probably a great example of like the supply demand world acting like different communities and millions of these communities essentially. So I think this is where like the trade-off between when do we keep the user happy, when do we keep the supplier happy, these are more like points in time decisions. The last point over here, which is worth mentioning, like there's probably a balance which is long-term sustainable. That, hey, how do I grow my business, right? I mean, if I'm Reddit, or if I'm a Spotify, if I'm like Deliveroo, then what's the minimum amount of, let's say, Thai restaurants you need in London for that community to sustain, right? Because if you don't have a minimum amount of Thai restaurants and the users who want to eat Thai food, they don't get enough Thai restaurants in London, they're going to go to Uber Eats, right, for example, right? So then you're losing interest from those sort of users, and that's churn, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
So I think like, I think this is where like you need to drill down, not just on high level metrics, but drill down on like, there is a group of users, this is what they want. Do I have enough supplies on my platform to keep these set of users happy? And suddenly, somebody might come to you, Deliveroo, for Thai restaurants, and they order like 3 times a week. Suddenly the 4th and 5th time, they might order Mexican food or Indian food or whatever, right? So now you see like the benefit of retaining those users on your platform, because you brought them for one type of thing, and then you can cross-sell. You can, they can then order like other foods, and other restaurant providers also become happier. So I think this is where the interplay between one side of the marketplace and the other side of the marketplace kind of comes together.
Yeah, and where, when it comes to multi-stakeholder recommendations, where do you see companies typically struggle? Because there are companies out there that do really struggle with it today.
Yeah, I think like a struggle in like many angles, right? A struggle in terms of defining the objective.
Yeah.
Like, what is it do we want? Do we just want users to spend more time? Maybe not, right? Quality time is important, right? Or even like just more time may not mean anything from business revenue point of view as well. Are you able to monetize those audiences? Are the users actually monetizable at all? Because again, if you look at the average revenue per user, there's a distribution. Some users are like $40 users for you. Some users are like maybe $0.50 or like $0.1, right? So there's always that distribution. So I think the places I've seen recommendations companies struggle is, one, defining the objectives of their platform, right? Because if you want to be multi-objective, they may not be multi-objective, right?
Yeah.
They probably should be, right? What people do, let's roll back 5-10 years, right? Amazon would do some sponsored ads at the end, right? That, hey, I create a ranking for you, I'll just insert some ads. Why? Because ads make me money, so I'll insert that ad, and like probably you're happy, and I can make more money from ads. So a lot of companies were single objective first, and then at the end they would do something heuristically and just throw in a couple of sponsored ads or something else, and then try to make money from that, right? So they were not embracing to be multi-objective, and that was suboptimal. Because then users get annoyed, they get frustrated, you're not even making money. So it's like maybe there's a lot more to extract. So going from single objective to multi-objective, defining what the objective should be, and then hiring the talent to do all of this, right? Because yeah, you might, as a leader, you might decide that, hey, I want this, but then do you have the right talent in the company to pull this off?
Yeah.
And do it responsibly, right? Because who knows, like, you make this multi-objective, there's some segment of users who are like much, much worse off. And if you haven't had the right evaluation talent, right metrics talent, then they're not going to be even looking that, hey, these users are much worse off. And suddenly your tail users kind of get eroded away over a period of time, and then you realize it way too late. Why? Because you did not bring in the right evaluation and metrics talent in the company before you went on this multi-objective journey. So I think like defining the objectives is hard. Getting the right leaders, I mean, again, this is not just engineering talent, right? Getting the right leaders who can reason about these trade-offs, understand that at the business scale, and then define ML problems around that. There you probably need like staff engineers or like some senior talent who can do the right formulations. And hiring that talent is also like hard.
Yeah.
And then you want like engineers who can build these systems at scale, like have the right infrastructure and have the right observability. You're working with like ShareChat. We used to work with like 50 million daily active users. I mean, that at that scale, you need the right observability, because even if some of the systems are down for like 6 hours, then like 20 million users have a worse off experience because of that, right? So you need the right observability, which means you need the right engineering talent, not even like ML engineering, just good systems engineering who can bake in the right observability so that if something goes wrong, you at least know that it's going wrong. And you would be surprised that, I mean, most of the teams I've seen in my limited career so far, they don't really have the right observability as they should, because things go wrong and you don't know about them and you don't kind of understand that, oh, there are these implications until it's too late. I mean, not too late for the business, but too late for like users to get impacted already. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Understand. And AI ethics and model bias is very much in the limelight at the moment. But for me personally, it's not something you see too much in RecSys. What can you do, or what steps are taken to ensure the right recommendations are made and data is curated in the right way?
Yeah. I mean, I would just slightly push back that I think in the RecSys community, right, Recommendation System Conference, there's literally a workshop series and a conference as well on like FactRec, which is like, I mean, let's just get the recommender systems to be factually correct, to be responsible, and like what are the nuances of responsible AI around recommendations. So there is a big community within the RecSys community just focusing on this, right? The one gap which I could see even after that is like how many of this is getting productionized.
Yeah.
Right. How many system engineers deploying these models are caring and thinking about that? How much tools do they have? Because I think there's a disconnect between, again, this is unfortunate right now. I really hope we as a community go and like fix it. There's a disconnect between people who are working on identifying these fairness issues and people who are making the recommendations model work in production in a way that they want, right? Because the people who are deploying these models, right, they have OKRs. Their OKR is that, hey, I want to reduce latencies, I want to get my satisfaction, D1, D7 retention up, time spent up. So these are the metrics which probably they are getting promoted and like getting evaluated for. These are the OKRs, right? So they're going to optimize for that, right? Because that's their incentive aligned goal. But on the other hand, there's a separate group of people who are probably looking at, hey, maybe like the fairness metrics are not so great, but if they don't make their way through the top metric, which the engineers deploying these systems are accountable for, then there's a disconnect, right? You can keep on kind of claiming that, oh, there's an issue, but then there are fixes, but then the people working on those fixes, working on these models are probably not incentivized to kind of go and adopt that. How do we fix that? One way to fix that is like, how, at least as business leaders, how do you tie in the impact of fairness to your business, right? Because I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The last 2 years have been brutal in the industry, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 2020 was like when everybody was rich. There was a lot of money in the market. People can hire. People can invest a lot of efforts on 10 different projects. Last 2 years, that was not the case. Everybody had to work on like, how do we reduce the infra cost? How do we get our operations under control? How do we kill like 5 projects, only work on the minimum needed, and probably like cut size of the company as well. In this world, if some of these fairness goals are not like capital linked, incentivized, then probably they did get a backseat, right? Which is unfortunate. I think the fix over here is us as a community working on identifying what's the link between these fairness goals and the business sustainability. Because you can probably be unfair in the short term and be okay and still make more money, probably, right? And as a business, you care about like making more money for your shareholders or for your retailers or suppliers. But then in the medium term, short term, not short term, like medium term, long term, that catches up.
Yeah, surely ethics is related to user churn in the long term.
Exactly. Yes, because there are some users who are like worse off, and you're not monitoring, you're not kind of being fair on them. You're not just users, right? We talk about fairness primarily from a user-centric point of view. And I mean, even that is not what we are kind of getting ahead of in the industry. But imagine like the fairness problems on the supplier side.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're like the restaurants. I mean, where are we talking about? Like, how fair are we to restaurants? Which restaurant should get how much amount of attention? So I think like, and these are like hard research problems as well, because I mean, you don't know, like at least I'm not aware of like a fixed strategy that, hey, you as a restaurant get these many orders. So I think like I'm going to give you this much attention on my app, right? There's no clear way for me to even identify what is the right target distribution for me to give to these restaurant providers, because I don't know, like, is this fair? Is this not fair? What should the right answer be? Should we let the consumers decide? Should we let our models decide? And every decision we make in the recommendation stack impacts this. 20 minutes ago, we were talking about candidate generator, right?
Yeah.
Imagine a candidate generator going from like, I mean, London, maybe there are like 5,000, whatever, like 50,000 restaurants.
Yeah.
If you're not picking up these restaurants in this area in the candidate generator, the ranker can never rank it. So you can't ever show it to the user. So now there's a couple of engineers working on candidate generator. They probably don't care about fairness from a restaurant point of view, but then suddenly it has an impact, right? Because they don't pick up these restaurants in their final list. The ranker never gets to it. It never picks up these restaurants and shows to the user. Now the user never sees these restaurants, for example. Again, I'm not saying that restaurants and food delivery is the only problem. Yeah. I mean, this translates to like music, short videos, like movies, all of these, right? The point being, recommendation stacks are like, it's a big stack, right? It's like candidate generators, you have rankers, you have re-rankers, you have evaluation. Simple design choices you make across different stages of your recommendation pipeline, they will have a monumental impact on the fairness outcomes. And they probably won't show up within like a month, 2 months, 3 months, but then they will catch up. So that's why it's important to pay attention to the fairness metrics and link it to like business sustainability in a medium to long term future.
Yeah, so you're saying the key is, like, say, linking it back to commercial value and the long-term investment of the company's future.
Yes, and a good way of doing that is like looking at some causal impact, right? Yeah. So, and I mean, predicting long-term impact. Now, this is a problem, which is how do we make a link between short-term and long-term metrics, right? In the evaluation front, this is like a golden problem to tackle. That a design choice I'm making today, like if I introduce you to, let's say, hip-hop music, right? You've never consumed hip-hop music, for example. Yeah. But if I get you interested in hip-hop music, 6 months down the line, I can get like 3 more hours of consumption per week, probably.
Yeah.
Right. So now, if I don't do that, then I lose out on like 3 hours per week from you, 6 months down the line. So one minor decision of showing you one track today, which got you excited about the domain, and then you went on a trail, you went hunting for similar artists, you created a playlist, 6 months down the line, you were consuming like 10 hours per week on just hip-hop music. So the point is, these short-term incentives and interventions have a long-term impact, but most companies don't have a way figured out that how do I link my short-term ML decision to a long-term impact from a user metric point of view. Yeah. And this is an evaluation problem. Now, this is where hiring that talent who understands short-term, long-term impact, who can do causal analysis, counterfactual evaluation, all of these, right? That's an example of a depth-first problem, right? Yeah. So I'll rather hire a staff engineer who has done some of these problems at previous companies before at that scale. This is not the first engineer I would hire in my Gen AI team. Yeah. Right? The first question you asked, right? How do we balance between like, I mean, hiring a specialist, generalist? This is an example. This is a problem which I won't attack right away. I'll still get my Gen AI product to be online first, right? Get the RAG to build, read the LLMs to output, do something. Maybe a few months down the line, then I can focus on like, oh, I can now afford to optimize for long term and care about long term. Yeah. There I need a specialist, right? Because they're a generalist engineer who has done the full stack, may probably not be skilled on the right topics of causal inference, causal impact, counterfactual evaluation to come and like solve these problems, right? There I would go and hunt for the kind of talent you got us like a couple of years ago, right? I mean, like you got a lot of great people from Yandex who can do counterfactual evaluation, and I mean, and then like that shaped our metric design like tremendously. I mean, thanks to you, we got access to that talent, which can bring in the expertise of like quantifying metrics in the long term, making these long-term predictions, doing counterfactual evaluation, and that really up-level our evaluation within the company.
Interesting. And you touched on it there in terms of recommending users certain playlists.
Right.
You know, something. This is purely an interest question for me.
Right.
You know, my preferences change all the time,
Right.
along with the weather.
Yeah.
You know, how
London weather, right?
Yeah. How do you manage something like that? And tying it into that, you know, let's say a new user comes onto the platform,
Right.
you've got no data on them.
Right.
How do you manage a cold start
Yeah.
problem? For example, I always go into incognito on booking.com
Right.
as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, incognito, like, yeah, I mean, cold start is a nightmare. I'll get to cold start. The first point you mentioned, right, that user interest change over time.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very interesting problem. And thanks for bringing it up. Like, let's take a look at like 3 companies, because, I mean, we've talked about like 3 domains, right?
Yeah.
Search, LLMs, RecSys. So if you look at Netflix, right? Netflix is like for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney, Hulu, whatever, right? My preferences on movies don't really change that much over a period of time. It's not that my preference towards action movies wasn't there today, suddenly it comes in tomorrow. No, I mean, if I don't like action movies, I don't like action movies unless something drastically changes. I don't like kids movies. Maybe now that we have a kid, like maybe I start liking kids movies, right? So these do happen, but like very, very rarely, right? Versus if you look at the music domain, like Spotify, there you're commuting in the morning, you'll probably stream like a podcast. In the evening, like maybe there's a party and then you're gonna consume that music, right? So the music preferences do change, but not like within 5 minutes. They change like over durations of the days or whatever. Short videos on the other hand, like if you look at TikToks, ShareChat, Moj, Instagram Reels, there the preferences change within like 5 minutes because suddenly you're like watching like one good football clip and suddenly you're like, hey, I mean, great. I mean, I got interested. Show me more. What's the point? Take a step back. Movies is stable. Your preferences are stable. Music, your preferences change, but not like within 5 minutes. They change like, I mean, there are stable preferences still. Short videos, the preferences change like a lot, right? Because suddenly you get like a nice astronomy picture or nice like stargazing time lapse. Suddenly you want to see more of them, right?
Yeah.
So across domains, there's a need for like different capabilities of understanding user preferences. What that means is the real-time aspect of machine learning is a lot more important in the ShareChat, TikTok, Instagram Reel.
Yeah.
In music, it's okay if I'm not like real-time within the minute. If I'm real-time within the few minutes, within an hour, it's fine. At Netflix and music and movies, I don't have to be like real-time as much as I have to be in like short videos, right? Now, justice has an impact on the kind of ML systems we will build and the kind of ML talent we will hire. Because people who have done like real-time features, like counter-based features, real-time using Flink, and real-time model training, real-time embeddings update, they are needed in the short video apps. They're not needed in the Netflix movies app because your embedding as a user won't change that much within like a movies domain. But then in a real-time setup like Moj or TikTok, there these will change a lot. So now 2 things arise. One, if I'm working on a short video app, I need talent which can understand real-time vectors, real-time embedding updates, and real-time data source, and who have done like real-time processing of like 50 million user scale data pipelines, right? That is needed when I'm hiring for a TikTok. When I'm hiring for a Spotify, I don't need like 2-minute real time. I don't even need like 30 minutes real time. A few hours is enough. Like the embeddings update every few hours, that's fine. Every day embedding update is also fine. At Netflix, it's fine. I mean, I don't have to update your embeddings like maybe today, maybe a week, right? So this has implication on the kind of talent I hire, the kind of ML problems I approach. So these are like the cross-domain nuances which you see across these 3 examples.
Yeah, cool. And how do you get a cold start problem off the ground?
Cold start, So I think like one of the ways in which we have tackled cold start was, I mean, either default back. Like, look, let's say, I mean, cold start on the item and cold start on the user are 2 separate problems. So imagine like cold start on the user is like, I know you signed in from London. Maybe I know like what like borough of London you're signing in from, and maybe I can default to that, right? Because probably if you're in London, if you're in like Canary Wharf, you're in finance, and like I can maybe extrapolate a bit about you, right? And that's blatant stereotyping, I know, but still, right? I mean, that's better than like not having anything at all, right? So I think like, I mean, you start looking at the IP, you start looking at where they sign up from. Even if I don't have your like music consumption or short video consumption preferences, I can still try to extrapolate from I mean, even the apps you have installed on your phone, right? I mean, if you have access to it, or even like in the quality of the phone you're using. Because if you look at India, I mean, somebody is using like a very high-end iPhone versus somebody else is using like a very bare minimum, the cheapest smartphone available, right?
Yeah.
So there you start seeing that what are the, I mean, even the Wi-Fi, the speed of the Wi-Fi which you have access to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of these factors start shaping in that what sort of content I could show you right now, right? Because if it's like a high quality, like, I mean, 4K stream, then probably you can't stream it because of your Wi-Fi speed, or because you're not even on Wi-Fi, you're like on your mobile internet. So I think these are some of the factors which start coming in. One of the things which we have done really well in my previous jobs was, if you're a new user, I don't have an embedding for you, right? Because you haven't consumed any content on the platform, I cannot create a vector for you. So can I use some sort of neighborhood users to you and then average those vectors and get you a user vector? What that would mean is like, hey, you signed up from Canary Wharf, let's find out similar users. You signed up using your age or whatever, let's find similar users of that age. Or you filled in that, hey, when you do onboarding on Spotify, you select these are the artists I'm interested in, right? Same, when you do onboarding on any of the short video apps, you're like, hey, this is the kind of content I want. If you onboard on Reddit, you select that, hey, I'm interested in these communities. So what I can do is I can find out other users who were interested in those communities, pick up their vectors, and then average them together and then give you that vector. So suddenly I have a vector embedding for you. And now I can use your vector embedding to recommend content. What I've done is I don't have you and your vector embeddings, so I can find maybe similar users to you, similar in terms of regions, similar in terms of taste onboarding, similar in terms of the attributes you have shown when you signed up, and then find those similar users, do some average, and then use as an embedding up until the time when you start consuming content. The others, this is on the user side, right? The other thing is on the content side. Now, content cold start is really a very, very challenging problem, because especially if you look at short videos.
Yeah.
Short videos, like 100 million videos get generated a week. And you got to recommend it. I mean, like today, like there's a football match, right? And that football match suddenly will get consumed by like 50,000 users within the next 15 minutes. So there I have to be like really, really real time in my updating of the embedding, right?
Yeah.
So what I can do is, a new short video comes in, I don't have the vector for that. It will be like 15 minutes before like 10,000 users consume this, right? So right at the start, I can understand the video content itself. I can understand what is this video about. I can understand the quality of the video. I can understand like what's going on in this video. I can understand like which creator uploaded that video, because maybe like if that creator has great reputation or like great previous uploads, then maybe that also shows up in like how this video will get consumed, right? So I can try to extrapolate from the content, not the behavior, right? So if you look at videos or music or like content has two properties. One is the behavioral dimension, which is how users interact with it. Do users skip it? Do users like it? They do save it? And there's the content information. So content and behavior are two dimensions of an item which I can use. At cold start, I don't have behavioral data, because that's literally cold start item, right? No user has consumed it right now, but I do have content. I can do a lot of content understanding, and that's where the LLMs are useful. That's how like the LLMs are shaping RecSys, not by replacing RecSys rankers yet.
Yeah.
But I can use stable diffusion, I can use like clip models, I can use LLMs to extract a lot more metadata about the content, and I don't need to rely so much on behavioral data to make the first set of recommendations of this content.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point I wanted to highlight. For content, let's focus on content understanding, because in cold start, I don't have behavioral data. By the time I get 1,000 users to view this video, then I have behavioral data and I can construct the behavioral embedding, and it's not cold start anymore then. So that's what I would approach, like cold start on the item side as well. But this did bring up how RecSys and LLMs are interacting, because I think LLMs are helping us do a lot better content understanding rather than replacing the ranker just yet.
Yeah, understood. I think that's a nice segue. We've touched on, why RecSys is good for building language model teams. How do we build RecSys teams to win? And I know that can differ from, if we're recruiting for an engineering team at ShareChat, for example, we need someone who's worked on 0-1 problems, etc. at scale. But let's say we're working with a small startup who are just starting on their RecSys journey. What are you looking for there?
Yeah. So this is like, I mean, what's the product? Is the product a recommendation system, or it's more like a Gen AI?
Yeah, a bit of a brand new recommendation engine. And the second part to that question, what's the split for you between engineering the problem and researching the state of the art. What's next?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great call out because I've had a couple of learnings in the last couple of years, very important learnings, at least for me.
Yeah.
So I think like if I want to hire a first RecSys team in the company, right? I mean, again, there are apps which, I mean, I'll give you an example, right? I mean, if there's an app that says that, hey, I don't have a real-time recommendation model. What I do is like for all the 100,000 users I have, I make a prediction today. Tomorrow when they open the app, I just show them those predictions, right? So it's not any deployed recommendation system, right? It's like, hey, tonight I will have a pipeline which gives the recommendations. I'll store them. Tomorrow when the user opens the app, I will show that. So that's the state of like a team which is not really very focused on like getting a real-time recommendation just yet, and they want to do that. So they'll start hiring the RecSys talent accordingly now. Now, the kind of talent needed here is more like full stack ML engineers, right? I mean, and there's a very strong reason I say full stack ML engineer.
Yeah.
Because the ML engineer is not just doing the deployment and system monitoring, but they're also like developing the first recommendation models, putting it online, looking at the right metrics, designing the right observability. So I think that's why my focus, if I'm hiring the initial set of team, is going to be full stack ML engineers. And that's what we've been doing at Sourcegraph as well. That let's get in people who can do the science, who can do the engineering, and who can do everything from start to end. And this is, again, right, I mean, some of the hardest talent to hire, but also some of the most fruitful, especially when you're starting your ML RecSys journey as well.
Yeah.
People who can do deployment, who can do feature stores, who can do feature engineering, who can do the data pipelines, stitch it together, and do a bit of science to think about the right metrics, think about the right model choices. Once that is in place, then I can go and like hunt for like people who are experts on each of these problems and then kind of bring them up.
Yeah, so you're saying the engineering first.
Engineering first, right? I mean, engineering first because I want my product out, I want to collect data. I would rather use research later on once I have collected enough feedback loops. And also like, look, the science won't fix engineering flaws, right? I mean, often I've seen people, and it's my mistake as well, in the past, I've gone with a fancier multi-objective model to realize that, hey, the system was broken. The features are incorrect and the feature pipelines were broken and you didn't have the right observability in. So one of my great learnings recently has been go for the science after you've done the correct engineering.
Yeah.
Because again, right, I mean, the fancy ML model is useless if the data pipelines are screwed up. If you don't have the right observability, if you don't have the right feature stores, if you don't have the right data, correct data, if you're not logging all of this, if your data pipelines are stale, embeddings are stale, then the model cannot do anything. So I think like ensuring that the engineering system is correct at the scale at which you're operating and then bringing in science is important. Otherwise, it's a bit of like premature optimization that I can bring in the nice expert on like best neural models, like 50 GB neural model deployed at scale, distributed setup. But if your features are incorrect, what's the use of that fancy ML model?
Yeah.
So I think like get the right engineering team, fix the right systems, have the right observability, make sure that everything is correct. Then I would say that I deserve to work on the science problems because at least I've done the engineering right.
Yeah, and with organizations like Spotify, ShareChat, for example, you know, everything's well optimized, well engineered.
Right.
You know, what do you see the state of research in a well built out recommendation engine at the moment?
Right.
Where's that all headed?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of recent problems, again, right, imagine like we are in a mature system wherein the system exists, the feature pipelines are correct, then the kind of problems which a lot of people are facing right now are mostly around, one, how do we leverage LLMs for content understanding?
Yeah.
Right, because the level of personalization I can do with LLMs right now is insane, right? We haven't even attempted to do that in the previous pre-LLM world.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at best I could understand what artists are you consuming, what sort of like creators are you consuming, what sort of tags at the high level are you consuming. But now, with the LLMs, I can understand the finer details of the metadata about the short videos you're consuming. So what about this short video? Because again, each topic will have like 50 different videos. Now, what about this video make you like it a lot more? So the amount of personalization which we can try to do right now is very different than what I could do like 2 years ago, or even like 1 year ago. Because I can do a lot better content understanding, right? So now the granularity of personalization is a lot more nuanced, which makes it great for the user, right? Because now you understand like even more nuanced aspects about my preferences, and I am happy to spend more time on your platform. So that's one, better personalization, more fine-grained personalization. The other dimensions where it's like the things I was talking about, short-term, long-term impact.
Yeah.
Right? That now we can have the right set of talent who has done counterfactual evaluation. Now, counterfactual evaluation is one example, right? Today, you come on my app, I show you a video of this category, right? Versus I don't. So there are two journeys, right? And that's the counterfactual view. If I showed you this video, you would have gone through this journey. You maybe followed the creator, that creator posted more videos, you became interested in that category, and then you started consuming more and more of that category. And if that category is more money making for me, that's great for me as a platform.
Yeah.
Because now you're consuming content which is far more economically useful for me. Versus, I don't show you this content, I show you what you already like, and then this counterfactual journey never happens. So how do we start making these inferences about long term and nudge you towards that direction? That's the meta personalization, right? That can I get you interested in a content category and develop your taste? Why? Because you would like it, but also that's a lot more money minting category for me. Because not all content is equal, right? I mean, why would Netflix show a Disney and Marvel movie on the homepage right at the first? Because if you consume a Disney movie, Netflix will have to pay money to Disney, right?
Yeah.
If you consume a Netflix originals, I don't have to pay money. I just get my ROI back. Spotify has like new music is always costly because of the marketing dollar spends. Old music is cheaper. Podcast is like almost free. So then if you're spending 5 minutes on Apple Music or Spotify, I would rather have you consume podcast than music, because music I'll have to pay the other people as well. Right?
Yeah.
So my point is, there is a strategic content on the platforms, and can I get you interested in some of those strategic content? So you are happy because you're discovering and you're kind of evolving your taste profile. I'm happy because I can reduce my cost of content, and other stakeholders are happy, right? So I think this is where the people are right now. This is not just an ML problem. There is probably like a head of content in most of these companies, right? And they are responsible for the budget allocation. They report to the CFO probably. They have like, let's say $5 million of content for this quarter. Where do they invest?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the problem. You can imagine like Amazon Prime doing this, right? That, hey, I want to invest like $2 million in content in this month in London, in UK. Now, should I invest that in like romance movies, action movies, or like some thrillers? Now that is a money allocation problem, right? Now this is where the ML now is becoming interesting, because hey, I can do like this counterfactual evaluation, I can do this like trade-off understanding, the multi-objective decision understanding, and then put a number that if you invest this much money in this category, here is what the ROI is. If you look at like the creator deals which companies are signing, right? Spotify signed Joe Rogan a few years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So what's the ROI of that? Now ML models can start giving you that outcome, so that you can invest your money much wisely and get a lot more ROI back. Now this is not just purely recommendations, but recommendation systems have to play a role here. Because can you recommend this content? Can you grow the audiences of this content? And then not audiences today, but audiences 6 months, 1 year down the line. What all content those audiences consume outside of this particular content, all of these starts playing out because you have good control over your recommendation model and you can do good machine learning. What's my point? My point is, if you invest in the right ML problems here, you can make better decisions with the content budget you have and get a much better ROI for your platform as well.
Yeah, understood. All makes sense. And when I suppose this could be different depending on the organisation that you're working on, but I think you're in a unique position and could offer quite a unique perspective in the sense that you've worked for two elite businesses with state-of-the-art recommendations or building state-of-the-art recommendation engines. How do you evaluate someone coming into that business that is going to be the right fit for the RecSys team? What do you look for?
Yeah, I think depends on the level we are hiring for. I mean, if it's a junior engineer in the first few years of their industry experience, then I would look for have they built the right engineering systems with the right modeling. I mean, again, the model formulation is not important because that's probably not their call at this stage anyway, right? I mean, we have staff engineers, we have talented people in the team who are experts on model formulation. There, I'm more looking for people who have built the feature stores, people who have deployed these models. They have at least deployed models which are users facing. Because again, if somebody has worked on just the metadata problem, right? I mean, Walmart or a bunch of these companies have insane amount of catalog. So if you're an ML engineer who has done a lot of work on understanding metadata, then probably that's not the first hire I would make in my team, right? Because I need people who have done user-centric system design, right? Who can deploy models for users, think about metrics, launch these A/B tests. So that's the right talent right away. I mean, that's on the starting levels, right? At the senior levels, I'm more looking for people and again, that's an evaluation criteria as well, who can iterate their way to a better solution. This is often like I've talked with a lot of like CTOs and like head of engineering who have been hiring. Often they have a problem that they get a ML person and they're like really going for the most hyped ML model out there, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then they try, it doesn't really work, you don't really know what you're doing, and then it fails, and suddenly like you hired a great set of team, they don't have anything to show in the first 6 months of their existence, right?
Yeah.
So I think like one good skill I've often tried to gauge in the senior talent is, can they iterate their way to complexity, right? I mean, I want a good solution out, but then the first solution should be heuristic. The second solution should build very, very quickly on top of that heuristic, add more features, add an ML model. From that ML model, make the model complex, and then make the model like RL based, for example, right? So rather than jumping to a bandit based or an RL based solution right away, can you iterate very, very quickly within a few weeks to that solution? Because then you would have deployed a very simple model, you would have gotten a sense of what's going on, whether there is money to be made in this problem at all or not, get a first heuristic solution working, get a feel for the problem, get your team a feel for the data, and then slowly iterate. So if you're just jumping ship and saying that, no, I will come in and deploy a bandit model, that's the first model I'm going to pick up, that's probably like a red flag. So if you can iterate your way and make it more complex and like sophisticated and like better over iterations, I think that's going to be a lot more like green flag for me, at least on the senior levels.
Yeah, and this is less of an issue in the kind of big tech enterprise world, but certainly in the startup world, seeing a theme where take-home coding tests are a bit of a thing, and I know certainly with working with you in the past, it hasn't. What are your thoughts on take-home tests? I know candidates can lose interest, for example. It's not beneficial from a recruitment perspective, it's not beneficial for representing the brand the right way in the marketplace, but in terms of effectiveness of making sure you get the best person in the job, do you see any disparity in terms of people coming through take-home tests or online evaluations?
Yeah, so I think that's a hard thing to answer essentially, right? Because it also depends on the stage of the market, right? I mean, like 2 years ago, I could never dream that I'm going to give a take-home assignment because the job market a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, was like very, very different than the last couple of years,
that's
right?
Very true, yeah.
So back then I couldn't even imagine a company trying to do this, right? Because again, the right candidate probably has a couple of offers already. They're also not actively looking, right? I mean, again, you work with like smart candidates, and they're happy, they're involved in the problems, and they're not actively looking, right? And those candidates it's really hard for them. At least that's what my experience has been like. Why would they they would rather talk with the staff engineer on the team, understand the problems, and discuss solutions in that interview. And that's probably is like a better gauge of like the kind of problems they can attack, the kind of interest. And it's always, if you're hiring the right talent, it's always a two-way fit because they are evaluating you as well. They're evaluating the kind of problems they get to work with you. They're evaluating your team as well. So it's not just that, hey, we bring in a staff engineer for an interview, like we evaluate them. No, we're selling them on our problems, on our talent, that, hey, you get to work with these smart people, you get to work on these problems. And that has been like one of the catches which has worked well for us, especially with people coming in from the Metas and Googles of the world. Because in a smaller company, if you're a senior engineer coming into us, you get a lot more real estate under your accountability. Right? That's probably not the case in big companies. In big companies, there's a small piece of the puzzle which you're owning, and you're kind of making it push boundaries there. But then you're not owning like a bigger real estate. But here, if you come into a smaller company, by default, your accountability and your real estate is going to be like a lot more higher. Yeah. And that's the growth area, right? That's the incentive for you to go and come and work with a startup, work with a smaller team, take on more accountability, and take risk under your name. That's probably not what you're getting in like bigger companies, because bigger companies, they have the work carved out. This is a small room in the building which you're going to be working on. Yeah. Right here, like it's a greenfield project. You chart your trajectory and like you push us forward. So I think like, is a take-home assignment really going to share all of that with me? No, probably that's not the right representative example, right? I probably won't be able to extract all of this from that take-home assignment. On the other side, with interns, we've done take-home assignments, but very, very specific. If the internship project is about like working with attention scores in the LLMs, right? So there, a great filter has been that it's a very small take-home assignment, very, very specific, time box to half an hour. Because again, right, typically what happens, people spend way long time on take-home assignments, and we also don't want that, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to spend like waste 2 hours of your time. Like, hey, half an hour, do this assignment. It's a very, very specific assignment. We provide you everything as an intern, and then half an hour just use the time to chat with us, right? So I think like we've used take-home assignment with internships, but not with like senior full-time hires. At least that's what my experience has been.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, understanding someone's logic, the thought process,
Right.
etc. But I think the downside is you potentially put a really good person off the business, which is
Right.
obvious. But
Right.
what's the long-term impact of not being able to get that amazing person
Right.
and that bum on the seat? So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, exactly. And also like as you mentioned, right? I mean, like, there's a long-term impact of not placing that hire.
Yeah.
Because anyway, right, it's not easy to hire good ML talent. Right? It takes time. I mean, they're also like they have a couple of months of notice period. They're gonna come in, they're gonna onboard, and suddenly like I mean, you're a startup, right? You need to ship tomorrow. You needed to ship yesterday.
Yeah.
And now you're hiring, right? So it's like I mean, that's also a key point. I think I wish a lot more engineering leaders who the companies I've consulted with. I mean, one of the realizations we've had is like, hey, hire early, right? Because by the time you realize you need that person, and ML talent takes like months to hire the right ML talent. You can get an ML engineer today, but they probably aren't the best fit for you. Again, I'm not saying like good engineers are not immediately available, but then the right fit takes time.
Yeah.
And there you have to plan ahead, right? Because they'll come in, they'll onboard. ML is not like deterministic software engineering, right? Do this, it'll work. It's not like a UI change, which you bring in, you develop this React app, it'll do exactly that. No, I mean, ML needs exploration, it needs iterations, it needs you to develop a field for the data, get the models to work, get the metrics to work. So what that means is, if I need ML talent today, I should have planned for it 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Right? And are the leaders doing that? And they probably should, and they probably aren't as much. So I think like thinking about at least a medium-term plan of like what the ML strategy should look like, what the ML talent should look like, and then starting hiring slightly early on, I think that's probably a good message to take away from people.
Very, very good message. So something I thought of on the way here, actually, I was reading an article. It was around 30% of CEOs in the UK have implemented some kind of GenAI product or offering.
Yeah.
It's around a third.
Yeah.
What do you... There's a lot of fluff out there. There's a lot of promises and claims being made. Where do you see the best ROI in large language models, and how do you cut through the fluff?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, I mean, that's a good example. I mean, that's a good data point for me to know. Like, 30% companies, 30% CEOs in the UK looking at Gen AI. Yeah, that's
basically the early adopters are taking everything on, and now we're more at the cautious state. More cautious.
And I'm hoping that number grows. I mean, that number probably will grow like week by week as well. Yeah, so I think like, I mean, if I were advising them, right, my advice would be like get the full stack LLM product out there, which is like get a basic context-based retrieval system plugged in, get the LLMs, get the output, because I think you probably need to understand what the business impact of your LLM investment is, right? I mean, unless it's a product, the product itself is an LLM, in which case like, you got to have better ideas than what somebody else could share with you. But then if you're investing part of your resources into LLMs, then a good hire and a good investment would be how soon can I get to a proof of concept. I mean, and there are like libraries out there, right? Llama Index is a great context retrieval engine, right? I mean, you bring that in, you bring the LLM in, you get the output, and then you start quantifying the business impact. So the sooner you can get somebody to do that, build that for you, the sooner you're actually talking about like, hey, is this actually making me money? Or where would I need the investment here? So I think like if you're spending a lot more time in just thinking about LLMs and not building them, not getting the first rack system build, not getting the first set of outputs, not thinking about evaluation, how do I evaluate these, then probably like you're worrying about like problems you shouldn't just yet worry about. So if you're investing only a part of your budget in a Gen AI product, get the product built within a week, because that's exactly what it takes. A good product will take time, but an initial POC will take you stitching together 3 pieces which already exist, because LLMs have an amazing open source community now. Right? And that's exactly how I got one of the interns which joined our team. I mean that's also like a great point. What are the sources of getting these candidates? There are very few people who have access to great recruiters like you who can kind of get the right talent, right? Otherwise, that CTO, that CEO probably isn't in the ML space, and they probably don't have. I mean, they are experts on different topics, not ML by definition, and they won't know where to look for such talent, right? I mean, one of the places is like look at who the people who are like committing to open source repositories, and that's exactly how I got my intern recently. Like, I mean, I was facing some errors on transformers. I was looking at the issues on transformers, Hugging Faces library. I got across a profile. That profile person, I scrolled through them, found them on LinkedIn, reached out that, hey, I mean, you've done some great work. Do you want to join as an intern? And they're, I mean, this is one example of like how hard it is to kind of get the right talent, right? Especially if you're not working with like agencies or recruitment, wherein like you have done all the hard work and you have those insights about which companies to hire what talent from.
Yeah.
And if I'm that CEO, I haven't done that because that's not my domain. So it's really hard for me to kind of find that specific talent, which is going to be like as frugal, as agile to get something together in a week and then like iterate on it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Not everybody is as proactive as you are. I think I'd be out of a job.
Right. Yeah.
But I think where a lot of companies fall down is the actual narratives that you're putting out into the marketplace as well. What specific problems are we working on? Not just recommender systems, but like you touched on the candidate generation or experimentation, and finding out where those people are and then engaging them with the right narrative. So ShareChat, for example, a lot of the candidates that we found for you guys were working at big FANG type companies where everything's well optimized. How many times does a recommendations problem come around where it's 0 to 1 at scale? I mean, that's not often, but similar with language models as well. How many are actually making a real world impact? I think that's where there's also a lot of companies still in that kind of POC phase. There's a lot of demand for want to work for a company who are solving impactful problems in the real world.
No, I think that 0 to 1 is like, I mean, it's a very, very underappreciated nuance, right? Because you want to hire somebody, but then do they have the right, I mean, skills is one thing, but the right mindset for 0 to 1 is different, right? Because you can have all the skills, but then if you don't know how to approach like a 0 to 1 problem, time box it, iterate it. Again, maybe not a lot of people agree, but my take on ML projects is like, I want to get to a first solution as quickly as possible, as frugally as possible, so that I have time to iterate. I know it's not going to work in the first iteration. I know we're going to make mistakes. We're going to learn. We're going to fix the training data. We're going to fix the metrics. So I would rather face the problems early on, right? I mean, if I'm starting a project today, I want to face all the problems I could face within the first 1 month. Why? Because if I face these problems in March, I have from March to December to work on solving them. If I am slow, if I'm like picking up one problem, making it really well, then like I'll probably face the harder problems in like September, October. I'll have 2 months to solve the problem, right? If I'm like very, very agile on like very, very urgent in facing these problems in the first month, because I've iterated very, very quickly from start to end, then I have more time to solve these problems. I have more time to think through them, right? So that's what people do, right? I mean, that's what the 0 to 1 mindset probably needs. That can you get a first solution tomorrow? I mean, again, hopefully not tomorrow, but can you first get a first solution soon and then iterate, right? You don't have to come back with like a best solution, right? I mean, that's probably will take more time and you won't have enough iterations. So what's the point? The point is, as you mentioned, right, the 0 to 1 mindset is not just about skills, right? It's about how do you approach the problem. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. How do you iterate your way to a sophisticated solution versus jumping on that best sophisticated solution right away?
Interesting. But last little bit here, just a little bit of fun, I guess. I know we spoke earlier about the Air Canada incident with the chatbot, but also there's a serious ethical implications. I think they got away quite lightly with what went on. But I think there's kind of this is not really black and white at the moment. It's a bit of a grey area. Do you think chatbots should be held accountable for hallucinations? We're on the kind of tip of the iceberg here, and setting precedents could lead to other things. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good point you mentioned. Like, do chatbots should be held accountable? For sure. And I think setting precedent is a good example. I mean, it's a great point, right? Because I mean, the way we hold these apps and these technologies accountable right now is going to set precedent for what happens later on, right? I mean, look at what happened like 20 years ago when Google search and like Facebook, I mean, they have the metadata about me, they're making predictions, they're selling it, making money.
Yeah.
But that set the precedent, and then we don't mind as a society. Like if somebody had done some thought or like asked for some other ways, maybe we wouldn't be in this land right now. So I think it's very important, as you pointed out, to be very conscious about what precedents are we setting here. My personal take, and again, this is just my personal take, is like, I mean, hold these apps accountable for the technologies they're getting out. Because I mean, Air Canada was a great example, right? That like, hey, I mean, it gave an offer to somebody which probably wasn't complying with the company policy. They went to the local court and they got approved that, I mean, Air Canada should be paying money because like, I mean, their chatbot said that this is a policy. On the other hand, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Klarna, Klarna is a buy now, pay later product. And they kind of in their quarterly investor reports, they said that, hey, we have saved like $40 million more or less by deploying chatbots for first level of customer support. Now that's a great example, right? Because LLMs can kind of automate a bunch of conversations, and if you give them the right knowledge base of your policies, right, they can do the first round of filtering conversation with customers, right? So Klarna made $40 million, saved $40 million by deploying this, right? So now you have a company which is making money by doing the same technology. So then, like, if you get to eat the cake, you should be accountable and penalized if you screw it up as well. So that's my point of like, hey, I mean, you can't just have your cake and eat it and like not benefit from the problems. Like, you have to be accountable if you're making more money. Which again, that's what the entire like this debate about LLMs are. They get us as humans to be more productive, more efficient, and that makes businesses a lot more lean. They probably don't need like to hire as many employees or they can up-level the services they provide. So that's the benefit they get, right? Make more money, be more efficient, be more lean, provide better services. And to counteract these kind of benefits, if you screw it up, then you should be held accountable. So why not? So I think like that's the right balance which we should hold the technologists to be accountable to.
Yeah, I think you summarise it perfectly. If you're going to profiteer from a product, then you need to be accountable for the actions that it takes, whether it's out of your control or not.
Yes.
If it goes into production, it's...
Exactly. It goes into production. Again, right? I mean, it's like literally your representative, which I'm talking with. It could be a bot, it could be a user, I don't know. But I think the one interesting point over here is also that it's not just about saving money, right? I mean, for these companies as well. It's about now all those users who are right now customer support agents, right? They can provide level 2, level 3 of support.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just you don't need them. You can now use that talent, use those skills internally to provide me even better support right now. Because most of these requests are not level 1, level 2, right? At level 3, level 4, I do have to talk to the human and like understand the nuances, and I don't want like a 10-minute waiting time. So I think like this is about companies using the LLMs, not just to reduce the amount of effort needed or the amount of like employees needed, but then like repurpose those employees to provide better services to me now. And that's like a win-win, right?
Yeah.
Because now the menial stuff, like the time consuming or like the obvious stuff could be done by LLMs, and the skill set you had in the employees, they can be upgraded to tackle like level 2, level 3 of customer support problems. And then I as a user would benefit a lot. You as a product benefit because now you're providing better support, and you can maybe outcompete your competitors because now you're really providing like a lot better experiences to the user. So there the employees benefit because they're doing better work. The company benefits because they're providing better services. I benefit because I'm getting a much better experience. So I think that's one example of like Klarna style companies trying to use LLMs to do something, free up the resources, do something better, and benefit the company and benefit the consumer.
Yeah. I think that's a nice segue to the next point, looking to the future.
Right.
So how quickly copilots and language models are advancing, and how realistic some of the responses are getting.
Yeah.
With AGI.
Right.
What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I don't have an official stance on AGI. I think I'm as any other user, right? I'm just oftentimes I wake up like, holy shit, this works so well.
Yeah.
I'm using Cody, so again, all disclaimers, right? I work with Cody, I work at Sourcegraph.
You're allowed to be biased.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. So I use Cody as a coding assistant day in, day out. Right? Yeah. And the amount of productivity boost I myself have got is, it wasn't imaginable like 1 year ago for me. 1 year ago, I wasn't working on the LLMs, I was working on recommendation systems and like multi-objective models. But then I was coding and I did not get enough assistance from my tools. Now, Cody can answer questions, it can write functions, it can generate unit tests for me, it can answer questions. I don't have to go to Google search, I don't have to do like 10 back and forth. It can do all of this, right? And I don't even have to ask. I'm writing code, I take a pause, it suggests the next set of 5 lines to me. That's the amount of assistance which I'm getting, right? So again, my take is like, I mean, the productivity boost is like already out there.
Yeah.
And right now, more people have to start using it and start consuming it and start benefiting. And then now it frees up me to do a lot of other tasks which I wouldn't have gotten to in the next 1 month now. So I can kind of focus more on like high-level system design. I can focus more on like what are efficient ways of doing it, what are better ways of making my project better, rather than like worrying about like, hey, writing this specific unit test or writing like the obvious code, making changes at like 10 other places, because now Cody does all of that for me. So I think Copilots, I mean, not just GitHub Copilot, not just Cody, not just like coding assistants, but like other Copilots as well. They're all trying to make us use our time in like more creative ways, right?
Yeah.
And my wife works at Block, right? I mean, and there's a lot of like risk management and writing work. And I think they're starting to think about how LLMs are helping them as well. So I imagine like a lot of like non-software engineers. I mean, there are sales Copilots, there are marketing Copilots, there are like risk assessment Copilots. They all would bring the right information, contextually relevant, right at the fingertip, so that you can consume and make the right decision, right? It's about making me faster at making the right decision, rather than like me opening Google, getting like a lot of these searches, get these results, analyze these results, spend like half an hour, write it up, and then make a decision. Now, I mean, you can automate part of that so that I can get to the core task really, really quickly. So I think that's the productivity boost, which at least I'm seeing right now with developers who are already using Cody, which me, I'm already using Cody. And I think like that's what's like getting like shared across from other assistants as well.
Interesting. And what's the next step? We're not close to AGI. What's the next level of a Copilot? What, how do you see it further benefiting people?
Yeah, I think like my PhD topic was complex task.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like us going back to that topic now again, because if you look at assistants right now, ChatGPT, mixed models, even any of the like Cody Copilots, all of these, right? So they're helping you with simple tasks. Like, hey, can you write this function? Can you write this unit test? But I mean, to me, these are part of a complex task which I'm trying to do. Like, I'm trying to make a change in this repository. I'm trying to make this change, which is going to be like a week's work of project, week's work of effort, making changes across 3 repositories, 7 places. Now, where are the tools which are understanding that complex task for me? So I think like one leap bound, one step change in the LLMs, which I think is about to happen and should happen, is how do you go from simple task automation to understanding complex task? And I mean, like if you're renovating your house, right? If I'm like buying a house or if I'm planning a trip, all of these are like complex tasks, which means that I'll have to do like 7 things in sequence. Each of these is like 10 queries, and then distill some information, do the next subtask, all of this, right? Right now, I can get assistance on each of them once I go there, but then I still have to outline that this is what I'm trying to do. These are the 10 subtasks. So I think like we're starting to see like agents start understanding the complex need, start decomposing that complex problem into small subtasks, attempt that, fail, iterate, and get together an initial solution. And that is like, I mean, that just really upskills the agents and the LLM and the assistants to tackle more complex subtasks for me. This is also where like proactive assistance is important, because right now I still have to go and prompt the LLM, right? And I mean, maybe I'm not a domain expert in the topic I'm working on. I may not know what query to post. Maybe there are other important aspects of the problem which I won't even ask the LLM about.
Yeah.
So can you be proactive? Can you understand that, hey, I mean, look, in this domain, I'm not an expert, but somebody else is an expert. So, I mean, people do, I mean, Temu, right? Temu, the shopping app, has like, hey, shop like a billionaire, right? What does that mean here? I mean, like shop like an expert, like search like an expert. I am not an expert in this domain. So help me out, be proactive. Proactive means that don't be reactive. Right now, LLMs are reactive, right? They can, you ask in a question, they can send you the response. But what about proactive assistance? Proactive assistance is like inferring that this is what I need right now. I'm probably going to step out, take a tube back to Stratford. Then, hey, I mean, be proactive, anticipate my need, right? And then try to understand what task I'm trying to do and then provide proactive assistance. So all of these are like next level of like support, contextual, which the LLMs should be providing. And now we can start developing those kind of solutions as well. So I'm really hoping that LLMs mature to tackle more complex tasks, do the decomposition, attack some of these problems, stitch together a solution, and then provide that, so that I can go from simple solutions to like complex tasks. And then they start becoming a lot more proactive.
Well, yeah, that really would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I would love to.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what we're trying to do at like Cody as well. That
Yeah.
can I get Cody to, again, I mean, you're a software engineer, you're gonna submit a PR request 10 days from now. You're gonna scramble through like 3 repositories, make changes across 11 files. That's a complex task.
Yeah.
How do I help you do that? Right now, I'm helping you write this function in a file. Right now, we are very zoomed in, very, very local. How do I take 10 steps back, take a view of what you're trying to do, and then help you there? So I think that's the complex task automation which we are trying to attempt in Cody as well. That how do we understand your repositories, how do you understand your complex task, and then help you do that?
Yeah, and obviously if we get Copilots to that point,
Right.
do you think it would get to a point where it could displace, say, hiring a engineer to do that same job, because effectively it's solving the problem that you had, that you would have hired an engineer or I don't know, marketer or what?
Yeah, so I think the example which I mentioned about Klarna, just an example, right? That I mean, instead of displacing people, just get them to better task.
Yeah,
right. So I think that's exactly what I would rather do, right? I mean, if you can solve a bunch of these problems, then I won't have, again, right? As an engineer, I won't have to spend time in like documentation and like writing unit tests. I can make the system more efficient. I can tackle like more complex, more creative tasks, right? So I think it's about upskilling. Like, I mean, this is typically what happened like 40 years ago, like when ATMs were introduced in banks. That's a very cliched example. But then, I mean, at least in India, you had like people lining up to the cashier and they would kind of take out cash and give it to you, right?
Yeah.
The ATMs came in, you just kind of put your card in, you get the money back, right? So we've seen this story unwind up quite a few times in the history. Now those people, it's not that they're not hired, they're just kind of helping me do like money management better, right? So in banking, retail banking, we went from like giving you your cash manually to helping you manage your money, right? So I'm expecting a similar trend to happen here. It's not that like we don't have engineers to do all this. We get engineers to tackle the harder problems and provide like better solutions and design like even more efficient solutions. Not because we need less engineers. We need the engineers, but then at least their manual and repetitive stuff is now taken over by LLMs, right? And by these assistants, by Cody, and then they can focus on like better and more creative tasks. So I think it's about moving people up the creativity ladder. And then freeing up the space for like all the manual things which LLMs can probably better do.
I understand, and you're getting a co-pilot to solve complex problems or tasks.
Right.
Do you, and obviously in light of what happened with Gemini recently with model bias, do you think that we're anywhere close to allowing a model to go off and solve things on its own without safeguards in place, etc.?
Yeah, no, I think safeguards are, I mean, that's where evaluation is a very, very important problem, right? I mean, I mentioned like evaluation is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And now think about evaluation. I mean, we've been in the industry, in search, we've said that, hey, if you spend, dwell time was a metric. If you spend X minutes reading this item, then I think you're happy. That's what's been happening for 20 years. If you spend more time, if you spend more clicks, that's what evaluation has been in the search and recommendations community across domains. Right? And that evaluation has transferred across domains, which is a very important point, which is important to acknowledge. If I was looking at evaluation at Spotify, it's like how many music you consume, what's the time spent. If I'm doing it on TikTok, it's like, hey, how many short videos you consume, how much time spent. So across domains, metrics were transferable. Now, the metrics needed for Cody and the metrics needed for Sales Copilot have no overlap. Because for Cody, you're trying to help me do this task. So I need task-specific metric. You generated a unit test. Is this the right unit test? Is it the right structure? Is it covering the corner cases? Now my evaluation brainstorming is around these topics. If you're looking at Sales Copilot, then it's like, hey, are you intervening with the right information? We are in a sales negotiation. Are you intervening with the right set of nugget which I can use in improving my sales profile? That is a very different evaluation than Cody evaluation. So I think like people are not, I don't think like it's as realized yet that evaluation so far was hard enough, but at least it is transferable across domains. Now, in the LLMs, evaluation is not going to be transferable. You're going to have to develop domain-specific metrics because now you're helping you, these agents are helping you solve domain-specific tasks. So now, where's the link to what you asked? You'll ask like, hey, do we need guardrails and like let the LLMs do on its own? No, I mean, you need evaluation, you need these guardrails. And it's harder now than it was in the last 20 years because now you're working on domain-specific topics. You need domain-specific insights to develop domain-specific metrics and evaluation and domain-specific guardrails. So now, having these guardrails for these domains, which probably should kind of keep in mind the domain-specific regulations, country-specific regulations, this is a very, very hard problem. right? Because you just can't Air Canada, right? You just can't let these models loose and like ensure that and hope everything works out. No, so I think evaluation is a nightmare. Has been a nightmare. It becomes more so in domain specific assistance going forward, and that's why I've talked with a bunch of YC-backed companies over the last couple of months on like how they are solving evaluation and like what kind of evaluation tools are out there. I don't think like there exist tools which help me tackle domain-specific nuances enough. So I think like that's also an area which I think a lot of investment is going to go to as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And looking to the future, just a bit of fun. What kind of areas of AI are you looking forward to developing? Obviously, it might be Cody, but what else?
Yeah, so I think like one good part about the work which we are doing at Cody, right, is that some of these are not just about code AI, right?
Yeah.
Some of these are like generic about any assistant. Part of it's about code AI as well. Like, do we understand the compiler's information? Do we understand code structure? Do we understand the dependency parsers? So a lot of my work is a mixture of code AI specific problems, and a lot of it's about like generic Copilot assistant type problems as well. So I think like going forward, right now most of these apps in the LLM space, unless it's like Perplexity, right, which have like millions of users.
Yeah.
But most of the other apps are tens of thousands of users max, right? So what does experimentation look like over there? When we hired, you helped us hire that amazing talent for experimentation, right, at ShareChat.
Yeah.
At ShareChat, we were dealing with like 50 million daily active users at some point. And evaluation, experimentation there is like very different. If I'm dealing with like 5,000 daily active users in my product, which probably is the case for most seed and Series A startups, right? Then, the statistical significances and the A/B testing is like very, very different, very different problems here, right? So I think like more than the future, I'm more worried about how do we tackle these in the LLM world? Because most of these LLM apps are going from they're not at like 100 million DAO, right now, except for a couple of them.
Yeah.
They're at like the 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 daily active users journey, right? So evaluation, iteration, experimentation, all of these here, because they have to retain users. They have to have high retention. High retention means that you have to do experiments and get the user happiness, and then you make your way to 1 million users, right? So who are the kind of people who can tackle these, and do we have enough of them across industries, right? So I think like the more immediate thing gonna come up is how do we get a lot of good engineering talent to tackle evaluation, experimentation, and because again, I'm a startup founder, I raised money, I got a product out, I need to raise Series A. To raise Series A, I need to show this amount of retention, and I need to grow my user base. To grow that, I need to iterate on my product. It's not about getting to 0 to 1 anymore. It's about iterating from 1 to 2, 1 to 2.5. That means you need experimentation. You need to be A/B testing. You need to be offline evaluating. And offline evaluating with only 5,000 users. Right? You don't have like the Spotify benefit of 400 million users, right? So you can't experiment enough. You can't do like A/B test as much. So what kind of talent can tackle these problems? So that's an immediate need. Which most of these companies who have raised seed round, Series A in the last year and a half, they're going to be probably thinking about these problems now.
Yeah, interesting. No, super interesting and insightful. Thank you so much for coming on the NeuralPod today, sharing your experiences. I know a lot of people will kind of relate to it and also learn from it. So thank you again.
No, thanks so much. Loved the conversations, loved working with you over the past few years.
Thank you.
A lot of my learnings on hiring ML talent has been with our partnership.
Yeah,
so
great.
Thanks for being a great partner over the last few years, and really looking forward.
Honestly, been a pleasure.
Right.
Cheers.
Thanks.